I'd like to introduce Don Davis, Todd Wagner, Jaffe Hos, and Ambar Ahmed, and Eric Mailing. Each of them is going to take a deep dive into the real-world applications and how organizations are thinking about and delivery synchrony outcomes. And ultimately, hopefully, those of you that are in a siloed state, coming out of the sessions from our Huron panelists will move forward. So next slide, please. So Huron, you've heard throughout today's session how Huron and Huron's clients have approached business synchrony, and just wanted to spend a minute kind of giving you a dive into the way in which we dive into it. So first and foremost, as you heard from Andy and others, it really starts with that strategy and creating that roadmap. From there, we want and need a deep focus on data. And people, as you heard from all of our panelists today, are the cornerstone and in often case the reason for our synchrony. And then, as Mario highlighted, we really want to be able to bring and take friction out of the process, leverage tools like RPA, like intelligent automation, and the efficiencies gained in modern technology platform to really simplify and streamline process. And then throughout, we heard from CD, PHP, how stakeholder engagement, be it customers, suppliers, vendors, is so critical. And then finally, the digital technology is the cornerstone of how this all happens. But it starts with all of these things working in unison, having a plan for all of them, and ultimately being able to execute and deliver from those siloed environments ultimately into a synchronized environment. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Todd. So Todd, would you mind introducing yourself to the audience today?
Good afternoon, everyone. I guess depending on time zones, it really is actually afternoon everywhere across the state. So my name is Todd Wagner. I am a senior director in Huron's planning and strategy practice. I've been working in this space for about 25 years now. And most recently, I've been focusing more on the processes to enable financial planning.
So Todd, what can you, or how can you kind of lay out and explain to our audience the key concept around what we refer to as connected planning? Can you unpack that for the audience today?
Sure, I'd be glad to. I really think about connected planning both from a process perspective as well as a technology perspective. So there are concepts of both in there. And really at its simplest form, it's that idea of linking business functions to the financial plan. So often FP&A or financial planning and analysis, often that team is really focused inside the office of the CFO. And connected planning is the idea of expanding that beyond just that one area. Lori was talking from the Nationwide project. One of the things she mentioned that they got a lot of value on was really the salary planning and the workforce planning. And that's an example of using an area outside the finance area, using another portion of the organization to help with the financial component. Another thing that you could think about would be looking at the sales plan. So when talking about Salesforce and all of the constituents and stakeholders, the sales plan or demand plan is really a key component of the financial plan. It's your revenue for those types of organizations. And so understanding that financial impact of the sales plan is another example of connected planning. And that's really from the process perspective, Chris. But then as you look at the technology, bringing in the data from those other systems. So that was another thing that Lori mentioned. And I'm mentioning the Nationwide project because I worked on that project, so I have a really good knowledge of it. But bringing in all of those data components from other systems, that's really where the technology side of connected planning comes in, where you're connecting that data, you're connecting those systems, and you're bringing that all into your financial plan.
Very interesting. So in that concept, there's this concept called functional adjacencies. Can you explain what you mean by that and how that impacts the concept and the activities we do around connected planning?
Sure. So To me, a functional adjacency is what I consider the plus one. So if you think about the financial plan or financial planning and analysis, that team, what are the other areas that they are working with? So in the idea and the concept of connected planning, you're really looking at what are the upstreams and what are the downstreams. So if I think about the financial plan and the budget or the forecast, I think about the budget, especially what has to go into the budget. What are those adjacencies? What are the plus ones? So some examples I already mentioned in my previous answer, but workforce is one of them. So HCM, your demand plan, the sales side is definitely a functional adjacency. The customer experience, the customer side of it. And in some organizations, like for example, one company I'm working with right now, with COVID, a functional adjacency to their financial plan is their real estate. So they're not dealing, or they're not having as many people come into the office anymore, and they had a huge footprint with real estate. And so one of the things that really was impacting their financial plan and their budget for this year was what were they going to do with that real estate. So it's a functional adjacency that you might not really think about if you look at the typical model and typically what folks are thinking about. But for them, in this year with COVID and all of the disruptions that we're seeing, it actually became a really important plus one for them to look at, and they were able to reduce their cost structure because they realized that they didn't need all of the office space that they currently were paying for.
Yeah, what a great way to help leverage a process to really reduce operational costs. What a great story. So how are some of your clients modernizing this process and making it more effective?
Sure. So at the very, very beginning of our sessions today, Alistair and Mario and Frank were talking about really thinking about things from a strategy perspective and understanding where you want to get to, and then what are the steps to start to build in the processes and the technology to realize some of those business goals. And so in connected planning, one of the important things that I didn't really talk about in functional adjacencies, but being aware of the challenges in those adjacent business areas, that increases that collaboration and collaboration and getting out of those silos and being able to be a more agile organization. All of those things will help as you start to implement a new strategy. Anything that's being done in a siloed or a siloed fashion is going to be a challenge, because there are those blocks then to communication, to collaboration, to understanding what's happening in other parts of the organization. And that makes it really challenging to be able to react quickly to the market changes and the market challenges.
Well, thank you, Todd. That was very informative. And I just want to let all the participants know that if you'd like to ask Todd questions now or throughout the presentations, please log into slido.com.
Actually, I have one more thing.
Oh, Chris. Yeah, hang on. And into those questions, and then back to you, Todd.
Sorry, I have one more thing.
No, it's all good
to cover if I have time. So
you do.
Okay, great. So I wanted to give one more client example. So I'm working with a client right now, and they're in the manufacturing space, and they have a very mature on-prem technology platform, and it includes both planning, consolidations, and management reporting. And for them, they didn't really know exactly where to start with moving to the cloud. They knew that they didn't want to just move their technology to the cloud. They knew that a lift and shift probably wasn't the right approach. So they also wanted to talk about the planning processes and how they could modernize those. So what we did with this client is we started out with a series of sessions to look at their processes, specifically around planning. We introduced the concept of the functional adjacencies because that was a new idea to them. And then through a series of workshops, we focused on several main areas. The areas we focused on were finance, obviously, human resources, supply chain, operations, and operations got into things like capital planning. And then because they were manufacturing, we also had the sales and operational plan. And so What we did in those workshops is we really focused on what were the connection points and looked at financial drivers. So for example, in a manufacturing environment, units and selling price are very important. So those were two of the areas that we pulled in data, we pulled in drivers from their S&OP process to help with the financial plan. So that was the approach that we used with them, was really starting with understanding processes, looking for those adjacencies, and then understanding what the financial drivers were so that we could pull those into the financial plan when we implemented the cloud technology. Now I'm done.
No, that was very good. And it's great to just see how you're kind of optimizing these business process and leveraging technology to get there. So great story. And thanks for sharing with us today, Todd. So with that, I'd like to pivot to my colleague, Umbar, and I'd like her to share, introduce herself, and then we're going to talk about how we're enhancing profitability via finance. So Umbar.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, everyone. My name is Umber Ahmed. I'm a director with Huron ES&A Commercial Practice. I'm a finance and accounting professional specializing in strategic solutions that bridge the gap between business and technology and help pave the way for my clients for their transformational journey.
Well, wonderful. So I know in working across Huron with you, you focus on the concept of financial and accounting structures as organizations are looking to plan and execute on business synchrony engagements. Why is this component of transformation so important? Why is having a plan for financial and accounting structures kind of a cornerstone of any synchrony engagement?
Yeah, thank you. So organizational and accounting structure are critical to your transformation as they serve as the foundational or financial building blocks that help organizations operating model that is strategically aligned with their business drivers. So for example, we all know the disruptions the pandemic has caused in this business world. If we were to look at only one aspect, say operations, the pandemic has not only changed how we conducted our day-to-day operations back in early 2020 or even in 2019, but it has also shifted the mindset of how we evaluate the value from those day-to-day operations. And that's just one aspect producing the need to transform. Now, transformation may mean investment in remote capabilities, similar to what Todd is experiencing, AI and automation for certain tasks, standardization across different channels and of the business, controls to ensure cost effectiveness. All of these initiatives need funding, direction, management, and having your organizational and accounting structures aligned to meet your strategic growth, say over a year, 2-year, or even a 5-year horizon, is fundamental to ensure that you have the ability and the stability to support these transformative initiatives and gaining that competitive advantage.
Well, thank you. And we've heard from Mario and also to our client panelists that this transformation is driving and bringing new capabilities to bear. Can you highlight some of those as it relates to this area?
Absolutely. And the biggest shift that we are seeing is around staff and staff capability, because the paradigm has shifted. We need to rethink how our staff performs, shifting from what our staff does to how their task adds value to the business. How can we enable our staff to drive the business forward, define courses of action, strategize, and expand profitability margins? So going back to that operations example just a few minutes ago, perhaps a transformation journey automates 30 to 40% of a current task within the finance function. It generates an opportunity for that specific department to reskill their workforce and leverage them on activities that help focus on future courses of action, thus empowering your staff with capabilities to, say, leverage data and formulate strategies around profitability. Therefore, the transformation is not just impacting a single department, but the workforce within these departments to help develop new competencies without compromising business acumen or analytical thinking. So with transformation, it feels like teams are shrinking in size initially because we're automating, but in reality, what you gain is efficiency and effectiveness alongside new opportunities and roles.
Well, yeah, excellent story. So, one of the big things that customers are needing in these transformations, given the pandemic, given what Alistair talked about with the changes in the SAP and the challenges that they face, agility seems to be at the forefront of that. Being able to adapt to market influences, risks, opportunities. How is it that accounting instructors are helping to make that from a data perspective? How are they helping support that for clients, your clients?
Yeah, it all comes down to metrics. So broadly speaking, digital transformation within finance should lead to financial optimization, which in terms leads to embedding business practices that generate the greatest revenue while minimizing costs. Therefore, it's imperative to leverage the shift that I was talking about earlier in the workforce, as we discussed, and focus more on measuring and analyzing business performance. So one of the key output of the finance optimization is demand optimality. We know that forecasting demand is crucial. We've been talking about it throughout our sessions today, but through transformation, you can optimize your finance to enable your team to determine optimal demand, meaning you can analyze and understand the financial implications of the actions taken today to then influence the demand tomorrow. So it's not just about generating demand or sales at any cost, but rather understanding the trade-offs of achieving these increased demands and sales and how the associated costs ultimately impacts the organization. So you get the metrics around cost analysis, you get metrics around other trade-offs or allocations of resources and its impact on balance sheet and P&L. And then you're able to leverage these metrics and model against your business drivers to build out demand planning and what if scenarios, which not only helps you better understand your business performance and make informed real-time business decisions, they also help you make decisions faster and the process more synergetic and agile.
Oh, wonderful. What when working with your clients that have gone through this journey, do you have any examples to share with the audience that some of the things that they couldn't do before that they can do now that they've kind of followed this path?
I think these examples are very similar to those that have been shared, right? A lot of our clients have been adversely impacted by the pandemic. So many corporations have said we are going fully remote. So going back to metrics, well, if we have cost associated with real estate, what does that mean in terms of the value our individuals are bringing to the table? Do we need our individuals to come into the office to perform their day-to-day operations? So for example, I had one of clients who owns they have a building where they need data scientists to come into the office to perform their day-to-day tasks. So they may be able to leverage those metrics to say, okay, XYZ facility can be closed down or can only be open on certain days, yet this specific facility needs to be open at all times to support business operations and longevity of the business overall.
Well, what a great story, and thanks for highlighting that. And if you have any questions for Ambar, please feel free to submit them. So what a great segue to our next guest speaker. So I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Eric. Eric, will you introduce yourself to the audience today, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I'm Eric Mailing, and I'm fortunate to lead Huron's Analytics Center of Excellence. So we're a group of data scientists, data engineers, data analysts who specialize in helping our consultants and our clients really solve their most complex data and analytical challenges, which is a ton of fun if you're a data geek. And I've been in the sort of data and analytics space for about 20 years.
Yeah, well, the data geeks are becoming more and more important every day. So it's an exciting day for you and your team. So Eric, will you kind of explain to our group, as I highlighted, as you highlighted, this area, almost every conversation today has been about data. But what are the root causes of that? And really, why do we think data as an asset is so prevalent in our conversations and just a key cornerstone of synchrony and synchrony transformations?
Yeah, such a great topic, right? I would say data is really it's the digital abstraction of a business today, right? It's how we run everything about it, our employees, customers, products, our sales, our supply chains, right? It's all reflected as data. And if we don't have high quality data and we don't have a consistent view of that data across our organization, we really can't effectively measure, manage, or grow our business. I think as we look back in history a bit, not too long, a lot of people have brought up the pandemic, but we can even look a little bit further back, right? And sort of the primary market events over the last sort of decade plus, going back, for example, to the 2008 financial crisis, right? I happened to be in financial services at the time. I'm gonna sort of speak from firsthand here a little bit, but we now know, looking back at that, how central data was to the credit crisis, right? In financial services, we didn't even know what we didn't know about our data at that point. We thought we were in a better place, but we didn't have what we needed to really understand our business, about our counterparties, our exposure to different types of derivatives. And so, in that sense, and that's sort of a negative example, but our ability to have that view and insight into a business can really be existential in consequence. A lot of people have pointed out the pandemic, right? And I think the pandemic has been in some cases sort of a good example of how far companies have come and what organizations are doing with data, right? We see examples in the early months of the pandemic where those organizations that had good data, that could put it to use, that had a consistent view, they knew where their employees were, they knew what their customers were doing, they could look at consumption patterns and adapt, right? They were able to very quickly adjust their business model operationally, sales, and otherwise to quickly adapt to a very dynamic environment. And so, I think from all of that and from all the examples that we heard today, data is really critical in that unified view to do not only the basic parts, sort of managing and growing our business, the measurement, the management, the understanding, but it's absolutely a key differentiator in our ability to grow as an organization and adapt.
Yeah, agreed. So we heard earlier today, and it's maybe a new term from some people, called business information model, or the BIM, as it's so eloquently called around here on. Can you explain what that is, and being somewhat of the architect of that concept, can you maybe explain to the audience what got you to bring this to the forefront of our transformations, and explain kind of the relevancy it plays in transformations?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so the BIM, business information model, is our approach to helping an organization look at their business through a digital and data lens, right? How do we understand and talk about and model our business in terms of information, right? And we found that as our clients were moving into digital transformation, there was a tendency to too quickly move to sort of the details of the various systems. Frank mentioned it, right? Too quickly move into, okay, well, what are we going to put in this field? How are we going to configure this system? And sort of losing the insights that come from taking a holistic view and saying, what are we really talking about here? When we as an organization talk about our products, what are those? What are the critical pieces of information, attributes, categorizations, segments, et cetera, that we need to know about our products? about our employees, et cetera. And we found that doing that very early in your digital transformation process, whether that is enterprise-wide transformation or something more focused, doing that upfront in your strategy work before you get into the nuances of various processes and systems, creating that unified view of your data, of your business through a data lens, just really changes the game in terms of the efficacy and sort of the analytical capabilities that you get as you move through transformation.
Yeah, great story. And just to add, in working with Eric and some of our customers, the BIM has also helped to bring together organizations that didn't necessarily see the world in the same way. So having that transformational journey that is also a part of bringing together people and process, by starting with a unification around their data, it really leads to kind of aligning processes and then ultimately then executing it and getting that user adoption. So it plays a fundamental role in that. And Eric and I have had the chance to see that in action with some of our clients. So Eric, one question I have for you is, throughout the concept of data, the idea of governance comes up over and over again. So can you explain kind of what governance means from a data perspective and its relevancy in supporting the definitions of business information model and executing on creating data-centric organizations and cultures?
Yeah, sure. I think data governance, when it's done well, is really about unlocking the value of data for your business, right? Perhaps too often it's viewed as sort of a bureaucratic, controlling, restricting policy and procedures kind of thing. But if we change the lens and think about it as an enabling capability, right? How do we increase the quality of data, the consistency, the validity, the availability of data? It is part and parcel, it's critical to unlocking the value of the data that an organization has. And so, from an analytics standpoint, where we often are, really just the recipients. We're at the end of sort of the pipe, right, on all the processes that create the data. Obviously, the higher quality, the more consistent that data is, the easier analytics is, and frankly, the more effective, right? The richer it is, the more insights that we can draw. And governance is absolutely critical. In fact, I would argue it's the main component and way by which an organization can increase the quality and inherent value in their data.
Wonderful. That makes a lot of sense. So when you think about this journey, data being the forefront of many of these conversations, I'm sure many, have been challenged with it. We've had all different types of data environments, data warehouses. Now we evolved into things like data lakes and whatnot. What are some of the keys that you're seeing, in being in the market, in being a leader in this space? What are some of the keys to success as our participants are maybe embarking on a data-centric journey and transformation within their organization?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you two if I could.
I'd
The
love
first
that.
one, I'm gonna cheat a little bit and frankly just refer back to the conversation, right? And reiterate, right, that at the very outset of an initiative, digital transformation, call it whatever you want, right? But where data is involved, you've got to take that first step of really doing that work of defining what these pieces of information are, right? What your data model is for your business before you get into implementations and sort of those execution phases. It's not always easy, right? We've been in those conversations, right? I'm every day, right, Chris?
Yeah.
But what is a department for your company, right?
Right.
And it sounds easy, but that can easily turn into days of conversations to really get through the details and get to the right answer. That's number one. The second, and I think this is really growing to be arguably the sort of the number one challenge with data and analytics and unlocking the value here. And that's people and skills.
Yeah.
Right. You mentioned some of the technologies and the shifts there. We have very powerful technologies today, right? In the analytics space, it's a buffet, right? The challenge and what really needs to be thought of as well early in that process is our people, right? The skills that we have, and how are we going to put people in the position to utilize the data, to utilize the technologies once they're there and implemented, to really be able to maximize that value. So all about the business information model, and I would say of increasing importance, and now absolutely more critical than it's ever been, is a people and skill strategy for your endeavors as well.
Yeah, this may be a hard hard question to answer, but I'm sure many of the people on today's call have heard from Lori and others about data. You and I know a client that took their CFOs and kind of replaced them with data jockeys or data centric people. Is there anything that you could share with a leader that's trying to transform their company as to how to get the right people, or where to look for the right people, or what are some of the ingredients that you're seeing in trying to find the right people to support and lead some of these transformations? Anything you can share on that front, Eric?
Ooh, though that is kind of a hard question, but let me throw some things out there. One is obviously the workforce is evolving, right? And so as we look at recruiting for our entry level positions and even a little bit higher, right, than that, you have to assume that those individuals have skills such as SQL and a lot of these things that weren't there in the past. And you've got to give them the ability to utilize those things, frankly, to keep them interested and to keep them happy. So that has been some good but a little painful of a learning for organizations. The other thing I would say sort of on the other side of the spectrum is we see with our clients and sort of broadly some anti-patterns, or what we might call failure modes as well, in terms of trying to build the organizational structures and groups for analytics. And one of those that we found to be both very common and just unfortunately not the most expeditious route to success is taking, let's say, a software engineering team and saying, ta-da, tomorrow you're now an analytics team, right? Or taking an FP&A team and implementing a new system and saying, ta-da, tomorrow you're supposed to do just analytics or more exclusively analytics, right? And so, it really kind of comes back to, you've got to think about those things. You've got to create a people strategy very early on for all levels of your organization, if your expectation is, as it should be, to improve your analytical capabilities across the organization.
Yeah, great answer. So we actually have a question to pose to you, Eric. So when you're thinking about data as an enterprise asset, how would you go about valuing that asset as a part of an enterprise value when thinking about M&A?
So, wow, that's a really big question.
Right.
So, and if you want to reach out to me, whoever asked the question, please do, because there's a whole bunch of layers there, right? So first of all, I would say that there are a number of different methodologies for the valuation of data as an intangible. And it really sort of gets to the nature of the data and its role in your business. And it's hard, right? The other thing that I would point out there is, especially the question was, I think, in the context of M&A, right? There are very rapidly sort of evolving standards and views from both the SEC and the regulators, depending on the industry, in terms of how those valuations are done. So advice there is include your auditing team, your external auditors, as early in that process as you can. Yeah, and then, without going into like some of the actual valuation methodologies, Chris, I'd probably leave it there.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
And thanks for taking that one. I saw that one. I knew that one had a layer of complexity to it. Well, Eric, thank you so much, and appreciate your insights today on data. So what I'd like to do now is transition to my colleague Jaffe. Jaffe, would you go ahead and introduce yourself to our participants today?
Hello, and good afternoon, Chris, and thank you for having me. For those who don't know me, my name is Jaffe Jose, and like my colleagues before me, I am a director in the ESNA practice. I belong to the PMO, and I have over 25 years of experience, half of which has been in the corporate world, and the other half in consulting. And my primary focus is in implementation of large programs. And my focus in the recent years has been on transformational programs and digital transformation being at the forefront.
Well, excellent, Jaffe. So I know in many of the clients you worked on, they're all embarking on projects to synchronize their organization, certainly their people and their process. Can you explain to the audience this concept that is in tandem with the synchronization around a target operating model?
So the target operating model is a critical component for success to any transformation. After having driven numerous digital transformations, we've come to realize no matter how clear the vision, how well planned the path to delivery, and how active the leadership sponsorship is, if you do not have the target operating model aligned to the right skill sets in your organization, the defined value of the transformation cannot be realized. As we roll out new capabilities and change, the target operating model defines the future roles and reporting structures. As an example, when manual jobs are automated, the target operating model provides clarity on the future state of operations. This is critical to successful adoption. Seasoned and experienced subject matter experts in organizations will need to champion the change. As Andy from Tallgrass Energy shared earlier, they focused on their people first. Not having a target operating model leads to the lack of clarity and results in the lack of adoption. Strong governance and adoption of the target operating model by an organization will prepare and position it to be successful after the change.
Well, excellent, Jaffe. So, in partnering with your customers, how are organizations unpacking this, figuring out how to go from their current state to, an optimized operating model? What techniques or what processes are they doing to do that transformation?
So regardless of the industry the organization belongs to or the size of the organization, as Jess Jones shared earlier, the first important focus should be to align on the executive vision and narrative for change. Leaders of organizations that successfully transition spend the time required to define and to be clear on what that desirable state of the operating model, the future state, solution, and design are. Due to changes that have occurred in the past years, all of us have talked about it, adapting to COVID, working remotely, or mergers, acquisitions, the operating models have morphed with time, and some leaders have not had the opportunity to define goal state with the end in mind. The talent strategy is also instrumental to the success of the transition. According to new research, an astounding 63% of employees today report a desire to quit their jobs.
Yeah.
The reason? It's not about money, opportunities for advancements, or a poor selection of snacks in the break room. In the modern day workplace, some employees have considered quitting because of ineffective communication. This interferes with their ability to do their jobs. Employees that are apprehensive of the change stand to benefit from understanding the opportunities that lie ahead. Success is more than providing users with a new system that is adopted by the business. It is changing the way your team thinks about enablement and leveraging technology to improve the way they perform their jobs.
Excellent, excellent. So you've had a chance to both learn from clients that have executed this well, and some of those that maybe haven't executed so well or missed an opportunity to, properly take advantage of these transformations to reimagine how work is done. Can you share with the audience some of the things that are working, some of the things to avoid, and then ultimately, what are some of the benefits that organizations are receiving, having kind of done this well?
Mhm. Sure. So the transformation journey can take different paths. Some key proven practices and techniques applied by organizations include considering the impact to people and the needed and required communication on this journey. A talent strategy that is aligned to the right skill sets in your organization, and a consistent and crisp articulation of potential challenges of future state will pave the path forward. An agile mindset, we've heard that a lot. Really, it is a culture.
It is.
And clarity on the future state, which is the target operating model. This will drive the defined value realized and also empower the team. You heard about that from one of our participants earlier. Finally, strong governance to ensure that long after the transformation program concludes, your organization will be successful at creating sustained value.
Well, excellent. So I have a question here, Jaffe. So where do you start? The question is if we were to begin or start a journey towards defining our operating model, what are some of the groundwork? What are some of the frameworks to kind of get a process or an engagement or a journey like this started?
And this is where, it's a methodology. We have it layered in a methodology. It's a framework that I can walk through. I definitely want that person to reach out to me.
Yeah.
We would love to talk to you about it. Yeah. And I would love to share our framework, how it works. It will start with the end in mind. We have a vision of what the future should be. Your team needs to see that, and we can help you through that process. And definitely there are deliverables that will walk them through it. It's changing the mindset from not how it is to where it will be. And the target model has to be clarified in terms of the processes. So if we're talking about finance, the processes that will come with automation and finance are different and unique. If we're talking about the energy industry or utilities, they are unique. And we understand that and we personalize that, if that helps.
Well, great. What a great story, and certainly a key component is really making sure that we engage with the people, that they understand their role as you go through this transformation. These can be rather disruptive, as we heard, processes are changing throughout. And one of the ways to combat losing people, making sure that they're engaged and that they know their role going forward, is really to invest and understand the target operating model. So Jaffe, thank you for sharing that. I hope the audience gleaned a lot from your session, and we look forward to hearing more about it in the future. So with that, I'd like to pivot it to my colleague, Don Davis. So Don, are you able to join us? There you go, Don. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining and sharing your great story with Lori earlier today. For those of you that haven't met you, can you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, again, my name's Don Davis. Obviously, I'm managing director here at Huron, and my role in the organization is one of the leaders in our digital transformation efforts and service offerings, helping to drive these type of transformations throughout our clients. Been in this world, in this industry now for a little over 20 years, and I've had the pleasure of engaging with multiple clients on several different transformative type of initiatives.
Wonderful. So we've heard a lot today about this concept of digital transformation and synchronizing solutions. When you look at it from your lens, what are some of the things, and why is this such a pertinent conversation today, Don?
Well, look, I think some of the underlying tenets have been around for a long time, but it's been exasperated over the past 5 years or so. And certainly the pandemic didn't help. And what I mean by that is, a lot of organizations, particularly the back office side, always get asked to do more with less. And there's certainly no difference today. And the reason I call out the back office side, I think a lot of times when we think of digital, we think rightfully so of the front office, of connecting with the customer and how to maximize those experiences with the customers. But it really does apply to the back office as well. It's just our customers are internal. But there's new and different and better ways of engaging with those customers. And given the fact that, we're coming out of the pandemic, there's a need to try to return to profitability. How do we get there? The competitive nature obviously is fierce. And you're being asked to do more with less. So you heard a lot of our customers talking about how they're going about doing that. Well, there's two ways. They're trying to drive, again, more efficiencies in processes that tend to be lower value. Mario made a very good comment earlier of lower value. And what we mean by that is the ability to drive value to the organization in terms of competitiveness and profitability and market share generation, differentiation in the market. It does not mean not important. These are all extremely important business processes. Think of things like regulatory compliance and reporting, invoice processing, receiving of materials and goods, all things that are employee expense reimbursements and payroll, all things that have to be done at a very, very high quality, but can be shifted in a digital world using digital technologies to a high level of automation, a removal, being able to process things, electronically, and then also even continuously, whereas humans need to go home and go to sleep. Machines don't sometimes. And so you can increase efficiency, reduce the burden on those processes, do them very well and efficiently, but without all the human interaction. And then that provides the opportunity then to shift the focus of the human interactions to things that matter more. So the more progressive type of thought process is needed in order to take advantage of the assets of the organization to be more competitive. And what are those assets? We talked about it earlier. Today, larger than anything else, we're sitting on mountains and mountains of data, especially those that have put in the front office digital solutions already, or the digital strategies already, that tend to interact directly with the customers, or some sort of way of interacting directly with your suppliers and vendors. All of that is collecting data that is basically sitting on a gold mine. If you can harness that data to predict your customers' behaviors, figure out a way of interacting better with your suppliers and your vendors, and ultimately use that data to be more competitive. Those are the winners. The studies show that as we project out the next 5-10 years, the winners are going to be those that can utilize that information that's harnessed within the organization today and unlock the value within that information.
Yeah, that's a great point, Don. You started talking about, the winners, right? When you think about clients that you've had the chance to work with that are winning the transformational journey, they're winning, executing on a Synchrony kind of strategy. What are some of the things that they're doing? What are some of the keys that you've gleaned that's working? And then two, maybe highlight some of the things that don't work well that others, that they may think are the right path, but we've seen in our journey that they just don't pan out the way we would hope. So can you share some insights to the group today?
Yeah, I think, again, I'll tie it back to, target operating models that Jaffe talked about. I'll tie it back to the organizational structures and the organizational change. The biggest differentiator that we see in the clients that are really taking advantage of this and out there on the forefront is they're thinking about that human element differently than we have in the past. And I'll give you a prime example. We're working with one financial services institution that is rebuilding. In this case, just happens to be their FP&A department, but their FP&A department being very highly tied to the business, the lines of businesses that are out there interacting with the market. And as they're rebuilding that, they're creating the business information model that we talked about that's obviously necessary to unlock access to that information. But more importantly, what they've recognized and they've realized is I need a different model than we've had in the past of finance being kind of the steward of, hey, let's create the annual budget and then let's try to manage the business off of that annual budget. And what they've done in terms of this is they're going out and targeting individuals, not necessarily obviously with financial acumen and so on, but they're not targeting CPAs. Right. They're targeting CPAs with a data science major, so to speak. It's almost the CPA, accounting, finance is the minor, but I want the data scientist skill set first and foremost. And they rally around this concept of being a citizen data scientist within the organization that are individuals that are highly skilled at interpreting that data. And again, we're not talking just financial or HR or operational data. We're talking all of this rich combination of data with all of our, collected in the digital channels, being able to analyze that in a way and make sound business projections and recommendations off of it. It's a different skill set that is, just now being incubated in a lot of organizations. I would say that's the number one key, Chris, that we see of organizations thinking about it differently.
Yeah, so Don, we kind of talked all day around kind of synchrony and what it means and why it's important. Would you mind taking a minute and just, given your experience, given the clients that you work with, the opportunity to work with Nationwide, Laureate, Nationwide, and others, how should people be thinking about it? What are some of the things that they should really do to embark on this journey and ultimately transform their business, make their business unique? Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, so a couple other keys that are going to be challenging, and you kind of asked it a little bit in the prior question, but it spills over into this one too. Or what are the potholes as well, right?
Yeah.
And the things you want to steer around is the traditional way of approaching these transformative initiatives in the past, in that it largely, a lot of times, it was a technology first type of initiative. Yeah. These are not technology first initiatives. The technology is the enabler. The data is the asset, the gold that's locked away. But it's the business process and the organization that are the, those are the keys to making a success out of this. And I'll give you some examples. As we're going through, for example, the project at Nationwide that we talked about earlier, and we talked about how we were able to successfully standardize the process of labor expense planning. That was a challenge, and it will be in a lot of organizations. And we got around that challenge through change management and also strong executive leadership. But you are going to run into, no doubt in my mind, you are going to run into resistance in terms of standardizing processes. We've always done it this way. We need, however many 100 different ways of invoicing our clients and so on and so forth, whatever the business process would be. And my advice to everybody is to really, really challenge yourselves to be willing to simplify and standardize those business processes. And I mean, really be willing to do that. And you're going to have to take a lens of looking at that of what real business value does it return to you? And if that can't be answered very, very clearly, it's a candidate to be standardized, simplified and automated. Okay. And frankly, the technology is going to force you to do that, because the technology in the cloud, from a digital perspective, that's a core tenet. It's not built around highly customizable business processes. It's built around being efficient, get out of the business of being in IT and get back in your business of insurance or apparel or manufacturing or whatever the case may be.
Well, thank you, Don, and thank you for all the Huron panelists. So I'd like to kind of close today. You heard from many of our experts. You go to the next slide. Many of our experts on how Huron is partnering with our clients, delivering digital transformation, data-centric operation model. We would welcome the chance to share our insights, help you envision and imagine your digital synchrony journey, and are happy to do that free of charge in kind of an art of what's possible session. So for those of you that are wanting to move from your siloed organizations into a more synchronized environment, please reach out to us. We're happy to cater our conversation, help you understand and create the business case for journeys of this nature, and dive into any of the areas that were covered today. So you can please reach out to me at cgears@hcg.com, and we'd welcome a chance to get you to know you a little bit more, partner with you to understand how we take your organization forward and bring some of the great outcomes that our clients have shared with you today, and partner with you to make your organization as successful as they've been on their transformational journey.